And we're live. Hello. Just going to give it a 30 or so seconds to go live everywhere. So please excuse the dead air. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Librairie Drawn & Quarterly's virtual fall event series. I'm Mara, and I'm honored to introduce our guests tonight, Fariha Róisín and Aria Aber, launching Fariha's new book, Like a Bird. I'd like to take this time to recognize that our publishing offices and bookstores are located on the unceded territory of the Kanekihaga. While many of us refer to Montreal as our home, it is named Tshake, and we are grateful that creating and sharing stories has been a part of this land for thousands of years. We urge you to seek out stories that are different from your own. Given the recent shift into Code Red here in Montreal, I want to note that both of our bookstores are currently open for physical browsing, but we'll be monitoring the situation closely. We are still offering safe and secure curbside pickup and free shipping in Quebec for orders over $39, as well as shipping Canada-wide. We encourage you to take advantage of these services as we look forward to warmly welcoming you once more. Lastly, thank you so much for supporting local independent bookstores like ours. It's because of your support that we can keep our doors open and continue to offer free events like this one. We are also hosting 9 different digital book clubs for young readers and adults. You can find them on our Facebook page and website. This evening, we'll have Fariha and Aria in conversation, followed by a Q&A, as well as a reading just at the beginning. As participants, you'll be able to write in your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to do so at any time. I'll be back after questions to wrap up with a gentle reminder that you can purchase both authors' books at our store. Aria is a writer currently based in Oakland, where she serves as the Li Shen visiting writer at Mills College. Her poems are forthcoming or have appeared in The New Yorker, Poetry Magazine, Kenyon Review, The Poetry Review, and elsewhere. She is the author of Hard Damage, which won the Prairie Schooner Book Prize in Poetry. Fariha is an Australian-Canadian writer whose work has appeared in The New York Times, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, Vice, Fusion, Village Voice, and elsewhere. Her work often explores Muslim identity, race, pop culture, and film. It also examines the intersection of queerness and being a femme of color while navigating a white world. She's the author of the poetry collection How to Cure a Ghost and the guided journal Being in Your Body. She has been a best-selling author at our store from the beginning, and we are so thrilled to be able to launch her newest work tonight. Without further ado, let us welcome Fariha Róisín and Aria Aber.
Yay! Aria, are you there?
I am here. Hi, Fariha. It's so exciting to be in conversation with you. Let me preface this by just saying that it feels, super special to be closing your bookstore tour, because I was there at the launch with Tanais, which was so moving and beautiful. I wept, and so it's an honor to be here. But also, apart from that, I've been an admirer of your work for such a long time. I remember being in my early 20s and reading your essays and feeling so seen and held by your work, and it kind of gave me the bravery to do what I needed to do in my writing. So honestly, thank you. I'm excited to be in conversation with you, to have you as my kin, and to build this friendship even outside of the Zoom room. And I was wondering if you would start by reading a little bit from your beautiful book.
Yeah. Also, thank you. This means a lot to me. It really does. Everything feels very in sync tonight. So, I just lost my page. Okay. I crave stability, but continue to fear the dependence that came with finding it in someone else. I admired Kat and could feel the good emanate through her skin, undulating with kindness and morality. But our friendship made me nervous. The conversational intimacy, the brutal candor, things that came so effortlessly to some, felt like a bone stuck in my throat. I knew that if I could speak like the Alyssas and Cats of the world, it would obviate the chance of confusion, miscommunication, hurt feelings on both sides, and my general embarrassment. But I had never been able to compel those gears into motion. I had never found myself interesting enough. But with Cat, it was different. I was still the same, but she somehow accepted me. It felt exploitative to feel this organic human connection, a synchronicity so uncommon that it felt forced, fraudulent. Next to her candidness, I stood filled with reservations, my tightly locked box of secrets clutched so desperately to my heart, and yet she made space for that, never once using it against me. I accepted this new dynamic, this new friend. In fact, I welcomed it because I was hungry for real love. When I woke up, it was my second week at Cat's, early before Cat and her children, Luke and Isaac, whom I was beginning to care for deeply, rose. I felt an itch. Thankfully, it was a weekend, which meant the cafe was closed. As I began to scratch, I felt it rise right into my ass, into that raw, cavernous hole, shifting like a diffraction. The itch moved through me, showing no signs of slowing down. I fell back against the unhelpful comfort of my pillows. I wanted to cut myself out. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Cat had emerged. Babe, are you okay? She had heard a commotion, knocked, and opened the door to find me defeated, my eyes pale with pent-up tears. I began explaining it to her, my bodily dysfunctions. She half laughed and said it in one way. Sounds like a yeast infection, baby. I thought I had had them before, but this feels really, really bad. She had a habit of researching things on Google and explaining to the boys, so she began reading off her iPhone. Yeast infections are caused by the fungus Candida. This fungus is associated with intense itching, irritation, blah, blah, blah. I stopped listening, in pain, and instantly began to think of that night again. Fingers, slimy, groping fingers. Those diseased hands. I was going to die. I mopped my wet brow as she read, squeezing the place between my legs, as if I were a human-sized tweezer pushing down on the multiple ticks that were pulsing through me. It started burning, but I kept pushing with sweaty urgency. I was drifting. Don't think of that night, Taylia. Everything tasted sour. Your eyes are like white discs. Are you okay? Her voice sounded distant, her tonsils jiggling as she coughed. Taylia? Tell her, Taylia. Tell her what? Tell her about that night. No. My eyes were zeroing out and I could feel the life pumping, the blood flowing like a beat in my down there. It felt like a boombox bouncing, pulses of sound and goop. I needed to get out. I felt like I was about to suffocate. What do I do? I asked her. Cat suggested medication, carefully giving me instructions to the nearest pharmacy. I could sense she wanted to volunteer getting it, but I was profusely wanting to prove that I was fine. So she patted me on the back with a kindness that she wanted me to feel, and I walked out. Outside, the city felt like glass and light, the windows high. The air made a sizzling noise as I walked on the pavement, and everything felt fuel-shimmered and smoky, hot to the touch. I walked into a Duane Reade on DeKalb Avenue and bought Monistat. Skipping out like Wile E. Coyote, I wanted to pull my pants down right there, but instead I waited until I got home. Cat cooed outside the bathroom as I plied open myself and layered on swaths of the cooling cream. It reminded me of when I had a burn as a child. Mama had run swiftly to the garden, cutting open the flesh of her robust aloe vera plant. She came back with such grace, holding it in her left hand, floppy with juice and gently placing the transparent lobster-like flesh on my gibbous burn. The crustacean-y aloe felt so cool, so right, on my bony little arm. I remembered her vividly for a brief moment, then cried by the chlorine-stained toilet seat.
Wow, thank you, Fariha. That was such a good passage to read out loud because it kind of like just synthesizes everything that's so present in your book, which is this attention to the body, like both to its beauty but also to the wounds and kind of like what is disgusting about it and what can happen. It mentions the memory of sexual assault and the trauma that Taylia experiences, and then also the memory of family. That was beautiful, and it's just, again, such a testament to your talent. Before we talk more about the book, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how the book tour has been so far, because it's virtual, and I can't imagine what it must feel like publishing a book during the pandemic.
Firstly, this is the book for anybody who has no idea what I was reading. And I'm really proud of it, and it's beautiful, and shout out to Unnamed, my publishers. So the book tour has been erratic. You know, sometimes I feel incredibly lucky. I mean, a lot of the times I feel very lucky to be a working writer, to, you know, to survive off of this cruel industry and, like, you know, transient industry in a lot of ways. Like, I don't always feel safe in this like space because, you know, art is difficult on many different levels. It's difficult financially sometimes, it's difficult artistically, creatively, you know, to go so far into oneself and like reach for this part of yourself to, I mean, I think all kinds of writers are sublimating something. I don't know what. I think it's different for each person, but you're like in the act of synthesizing, and you know, there's something really alchemical to it and powerful. You know, like The Gift by Lewis Hyde, you know, this idea that you're channeling, you know, and it's in indigenous cultures, it is an offering, you know, that you give. So I feel so grateful for that opportunity, because it saved me, and it also, like, I think helps other people, you know. That is like there is this like holy transaction in that, you know. At the same time, it's really mentally debilitating, you know, and I struggle with unlikability all the time. And I think about it all the time, because I think when you are a prominent, and I'm not saying that I am, but when you're really on any kind of level that anybody pays attention to you, and somebody doesn't like the way that you look, somebody doesn't like the way that you talk, somebody doesn't like one sentence that you wrote once, you know, anyone can critique you. And it's this thing that I don't quite understand. It's like to me, this is an offering, and I want it to be a communal thing. You know, I want to feed and be fed. And that, yeah, the experience of accessing yourself, locating deep things is depleting, and it doesn't feel like fair work sometimes. You know, like, how much should it cost for me to pour my whole entire being out onto the page, only to be critiqued or possibly disliked, only to the, you know. And of course I'm being pessimistic, but those things, you hold that, you know, you have a Capricorn moon, I have a Capricorn sun. I am deeply ruled by Capricorn, my favorite thing to tell people, but it's true. I mean, I am like ruled by Saturn, and work is very, very vital to my being, and I am fueled by it. But then that becomes a very lonely process when it's just the act of the work that brings you any kind of solace, because everything else doesn't. Everything else is just like cool, like, you know, whether it's a good thing, like, that's great, but it's ephemeral, you know. It's not enough to satiate you. You are only only, and in a way, like, I feel like if I can free myself, if I can completely just forget that, if I can just like get tunnel vision with me in the art, maybe that's the only way that I can survive this game. Because yeah, the depression and the all the things that come with like people being writers, it's all true, you know? So yeah, I'm feeling a lot. That's where I'm at.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I love the way you answered that question, because you delved into spirituality and the trials and tribulations of like being an artist, and going through so many different emotions, especially in our time right now where we lack community. We lack that physical space where we can like get together and congregate around a piece of art. And there are so many themes in Like a Bird that feel really relevant and timely right now, because Taylia goes on this journey of healing and self-discovery, and she finds not romantic love, but she finds a community of people, and it feels really intersectional too. She's not Muslim, but there are, like, her mom is Jewish and she's biracial, and there are Muslim characters and there are Black characters and there's queerness and there are all of these things which feel really relevant to our time right now. And I'm like so fascinated by the fact that you started writing this when you were 12, and now you've created something that was published in 2020 and serves as this tender antidote to the moment that we're in politically. And yeah, how much did the story change over the last 18 years that you spent with it?
Firstly, the other day, I think it was with Denise actually, I realized that I started writing it in 2002 and then it's getting released in 2020. And numerology, my like uncle's a numerologist, and like all that shit's like intense. And so that mirroring was quite interesting for me. Thematically, I'm going through a lot of things, recycling through a lot of emotions. In terms of like what's changed, everything's changed, you know, like, and then a lot of things haven't, like all the main characters are the same. What else? I think Tassine was probably actually like a later addition. I think, I can't exactly remember the timeline of that, because basically I started writing this version, this draft at 12, finished sort of like an extended version of that when I was 15. So that was like maybe the first draft I ever finished. And that was very simplistic, you know, it was like overly romantic, you know, there was like this obsession with a patriarchal figure saving you, you know, because that was very much what I believed at the time, and very much what I thought what would save me from my experience, and what would like be a salve to my life, you know, that I would get married and like be protected and you know, my husband would look after me. And then of course, like, you know, the queerness came in very slowly. And it just began to like really, really reflect who I was and be shaped through that. I think every single time I've worked on it throughout these last 18 years, and there are many years that I didn't work on it, it was just, I see it sort of as a like a lump of clay that you then, you know, carve into a sculpture that you recognize, or like something that you had once seen in a dream, or like in this like original moment, and then you're constantly working towards that vision. And of course, like throughout the process of it, you know, certain kinds of signs come to you, and you're like, okay, this is how I need to construct this. And but ultimately, like, you know, regardless of romance or not, the story is and will always be a survivor's story, and ultimately that is the true experience of Taylia. She is a remarkable person because she goes through what many of us go through, and is like willing to look at it, you know. That to me is a really admirable quality.
No, 100%. I admire that quality about Taylia too, and I find her so interesting as a character because she's unlike anyone else I have read in fiction, and you're always doing things that are so unexpected. I kind of like see you as this rebel, a tender rebel against these inherited structures that we have in our culture, of course, as Muslims / Western Asians / South Asians, but also like in society at large, where patriarchal values are present. You kind of go against that. You go against the notion of like using or abusing purity in order to control women's bodies, and that's something that I admire about your work so much. But you're also, in a way, I find, defying the expectations of the publishing industry, right? Because with debut authors or debut novelists especially, what we kind of are used to seeing is an autobiographical story as the first novel, something that's definitely lifted from your life, a character that is kind of like related to who you are. And that's not who Taylia is. I'm sure there are parallels between you and her, but she came to you, or her story came to you in a dream, right? When you were 12. And there are a lot of questions I have about that. Like, first of all, how did it feel being 12 years old and holding that vision in your body? And like, yeah, how did that feel? But also, what is your relationship to the spiritual world? Because there's not only dedication that you have to craft, working on the same thing for 18 years, just, yeah, so persistent. Obviously, you're a Capricorn, I'm an Aries. I would have abandoned it long ago. but, but there's also not just like dedication to the project of the work, but also to your own intuition and to your vision, you know, to like this visitation that you had and staying faithful to that. I find it so fascinating, and it kind of like is a continual theme in your work too. So yeah, just tell me.
That's such a beautiful question, Aria, and nobody has asked me that. Thank you. That is, you see me, you do. I have, yeah, I mean, I keep telling myself, and this is when the imposter syndrome comes in, or when I like read something shitty about me, you know, on the internet, I have to remind myself that nobody can take away the fact that I stayed with a story for 18 years. And I believed in it no matter what anyone told me. And this wasn't like a road to success, you know, like a lot of people didn't believe in this book. I write that in the acknowledgements. It's true. Like, you know, I have shown a lot of people throughout the years, and for a long time it wasn't very good. You know, I'm not like saying like I've been a genius since I was 12. Like it really needed a lot of drafts and a lot of different iterations for it to arrive here. And frankly, like I couldn't have published even a draft of last year. I wouldn't want to. Like it is, I think it's finally come to where it needed to come. But yeah, I don't know. It's something I have to tell myself and remind myself that it's quite a feat. And I think that it is a reflection of my dedication to myself and my dedication to God. You know, like I'm incredibly, I feel very close to God, and I feel very dedicated to the truth. You know, I feel very dedicated to making this world a better place. I don't need to be a hero. I don't need to, you know, I have to remind myself that it's not about the accolade. It's not about any of that. It's about this work that I get to make, you know, that is saving me, but is doing something with the mission of making the world better, and listening to God's guidance.
I love that. I'm so moved right now. That was such a beautiful answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's why like it comes into everything I write. I can't escape it. You know, it's not like a thing that, you know, it's a performance or anything. It's it really is my whole praxis, you know, my spirituality, like, is in everything I do, because I think ultimately when you get to a point in your own spiritual practice, it has to merge with everything that you do. There can't be this dislocation. That's really like the whole point, you know. The whole point is, like, Islam is a way of life. It's a philosophy. It's not a religion. That's something that's so integral to the way that Muslims practice faith. And yet, you know, I think I mean, it's a whole other conversation about the way that Islam's been corrupted and shifted. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to channel also this, like, you know, golden age, renaissance of Islam, where it's just purely poetry and philosophy and these Sufi conceptions, but also not Sufi. Like, you know, it was Islam. It was like it was an understanding of how God comes into the physical realm, and the emergence of all of those things. And I think that that's definitely a very important thing for me to practice in my art.
I love that. And I'm really inspired by what you just said, that there can't be a divorce between your spiritual practice and your artistic practice. I think I need to learn that and implement that in my life too, even though often, like, the act of writing feels like praying. This is not a notion that I came up with. I think that's been that's been thought for a long time, but it feels really simple to sit down with a page and channel something, you know, channel something that's outside of yourself. Even though a lot of people find that it sounds esoteric, I think, yeah, that's not true, that everybody has access to that, you know. It's not that we have, like, a weird witchy gift. I do think art can visit anyone if they just sit down, that it's like that faith and spirituality, that those aspects of life are democratic and they're not exclusive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You do that too. Yeah, I mean, Heart Damage was absolutely, you know, that as well. And that's such a beautiful thing to be able to put onto a page.
Thank you, Fariha. It means a lot. I mean, another thing I think that's common in both my work and your work is this concept, and just like the concept of beauty, but also like beautiful writing as an aesthetic practice. Because I feel like as millennials in our generation, we're kind of disillusioned with the idea of beauty. I find that the millennial novel especially is one that's, in terms of style, really epigrammatic and kind of disgusting, which has its merits and I think is important, especially when there are female characters, to talk about things that aren't just shitting flowers. But there is this notion that beauty can't save us, I find, in our generation present, and you go against that. And I often get asked what the value of beauty is in my writing and in my life, but I wonder what it is for you too. Your writing is so beautiful. There is so much poetry in it, and Like a Bird, and generally in your writing.
Thank you, babe. Yeah, it's something that, yeah, you're right. Both of us, I mean, we are moved by beauty, and we are driven by it as well. You know, a lot of the style of Like a Bird is something that I started as a kid. You know, like, I was reading a lot of literature. I was reading a lot of white canon literature. And I think that in a lot of ways, my writing is trying to sort of question what is canon, whilst also taking a lot of those styles and reapplying it, and making it mine, you know, talking about the things that I want to talk about. Something that I remember you told me soon after you read it is that none of the main characters in the book are white. And I just thought that's like, you know, something that I feel like that was very intentional, you know, because it's not an exploration of whiteness. It's everything that exists in the empty space outside of it. And, you know, I see wellness and, like, conversations about healing, really the empty space between science and everything else. You know, like, there's so much that we don't know. And I think my writing is is an attempt at finding something that, or saying something, or speaking to something, or uncovering something that is not yet known, or hasn't yet been written about in that specific context. And healing is this, and like, you know, I resent this idea of like healing writing, but like I also know that that's definitely one of the things that I find myself most moved by, you know, writing that interrogates being and humanness. And I find a lot of beauty in that, you know, like The Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, you know, is one of those books where like, you know, she's talking about bugs and she's writing about creeks and she's writing about frogs and the pebbles and the way that the water moves against dirt and sand and mosquitoes and like there's this lushness to something that maybe otherwise would be quite abstracted, you know. And I've been really moved recently by like nature writing, and I've been wanting to read a lot of books about like trees and you know, Braiding Sweetgrass by Ron Wall Kimmerer is just like a perfect book for that reason. But to go back to your original question, beautiful writing and my pursuit of it is also because I think it's a survival technique. And it's also like a reminder to self to be like, I deserve this too. I deserve to write like this too. And a couple of years ago, I talk about this podcast a lot, or this episode a lot, but John O'Donohue, who is a priest and a poet, he did this interview with Krista Tippett on being, and he talks a lot about beauty and how there's something so powerful in remembering something beautiful and keeping it in your mind, like seeing something beautiful and retaining that can help you through so many difficult processes in your life, and how integral that is for all of us as a survival technique. So yeah, I think that really resonated with me when I heard it, and it kind of gave meaning to this thing that I didn't even know I was doing.
I love that. I had never thought of beauty as a survival technique before, but it makes so much sense because I kind of like my artistic gaze turns towards beauty too when I write about something specifically violent. And I often questioned that impulse because sometimes it felt disingenuous to me to do that, or like an easy feat out to say, okay, both of these things exist in equilibrium. But I think that beauty, or like I think that violence complicates beauty too. And I love that you said that you're drawn to nature writing because there is so much beauty and the sublime found in nature, which is divorced from what we do to each other as humans. Mm-hmm. Right? And kind of like, I'm so fascinated by the idea that beauty does not care about us, at least beauty in nature. And there is so much that we can learn from that it's just continuing to do what it's doing, and instead of self-destructing, you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, I am learning so much. But yeah, the question of beauty is one that I get asked so much, and I think about constantly.
How do you usually answer it?
I don't know. I think it's always different. As I said, I think that with violence, with beautiful writing about something like war or something, I have to do it because that's how I see the world. Because I can't look at the world and not see lushness. You know, that's how I experience it. So it would be inauthentic if I tried to write like C.D. Wright, you know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love her writing so much. That's not how I see the world, and that's not how I experience it. I experience it with so much texture, and I don't know, I'm a very sensual person, and I know there is sensuality and beauty too in C.D. Wright's writing, but I'm just not a very restrained person. So why would I not bring that onto the page? Everything I go through feels so visceral to me. So I want to put that in my writing too, and stay faithful to the way I see the world. But I'm also interested in violence complicating this idea of beauty, and seeing beauty as something violent too. So, that's a notion that I have, but I do feel that beauty can be violent in the face of atrocities. Like I go out of my house and I see that the pink jasmine is blooming, even though my friend recently died. Like, how dare the pink jasmine be so beautiful? Why is that still existing? So there is a lot of tension between my emotions and what I experience as beautiful in the world.
The moments in Hard Damage that like really made like were just like air trapped in my lungs with like so much just pain and viscerality was the moments you would talk about really violent things that were so beautiful, like, and to me the entire time I was reading you, I was like, this is what an Afghan writer writes. Like, like to me that's like the epitome, because that's how I feel about being Bangladeshi, about like where our regions are so rife with blood, and our histories and our histories that have been barely touched with language, like, obviously that's not fully true, but like, in English at least, and we're extracting and like trying to look at these pasts that are so obscured to us because of war. And we're trying to retain these memories that are ours but are also our ancestors. Like, there's something really violent in that experience. Trying to excavate that feeling.
Let's talk about excavation, self-excavation, and in both your characters in the novel, but also in yourself, because I feel like we're going on this journey of self-excavation, and the self becomes communal and ancestral, as you said, and we're digging at our psyche and kind of like bringing to the surface all of this dirt and the kind of like facets that may be uncomfortable to look at. And I feel that it's emotionally so draining as a writer to do that. And the way the coming of age story of Taylia is structured, she's doing that too, right? Like on her journey, she's excavating her own psyche and her ancestral history too. And,
yeah, I mean, that pulling away from this body that you once were is such an excruciating process. And she's just trying to like slowly do that. And that to me was my entire 20s of being a certain way as a child, that kind of completely being dismissed as a reasonable way to live. And then becoming and like hardening myself for like, doing certain things mentally, disassociating, learning how to disassociate. All of those things I really wanted to apply into Taylia's character, because that, I don't know a lot of things that talk about that experience. And, mixed in with that expectation of all of the familial expectations that, growing up in a certain kind of family that puts a lot of pressure on you but doesn't see you. It completely wants to distill you into all the things that you're not. And you're, that to me is a really painful process. And it's also, again, to go back to beauty, it's also a beautiful process. And, it's a process that I'm extremely consumed by in my own life. I am constantly in a state of mental excavation, because we are humans. Our art is purely reflecting our human experience. And I think both of us are really similar in that sense. And I always just like, you And I feel very similarly, you know, like everything is palpable. There's a palpable tension to life, and you know, we have strong emotions, and that's why our art is emotional. But not everybody wants to do that with their lives, you know, and so that to me it's difficult to make this kind of art, this art that does excavate, and also to be a person who excavates, because it means that on some level you're always existing in a dream plane. You're always kind of outside of yourself as much as you're in yourself, because you are cognizant of all the things that you're trying to do and balance at the same time. Does that make sense? Like that's
a lot of sense. It makes so much sense. It actually, as you're speaking right now, I'm thinking of a spiritual healer that I saw many years ago, I think in 2012, who told me exactly that. She said that I'm not very grounded because I'm constantly in the other plane, and she gave me like these grounding exercises, which I find interesting because that's my impulse too, and it feels really it feels like it goes against what we're used to in our society, which is so, especially in the West, which is so anti-spiritual, and to be drawn to do the opposite and to not focus on what is right here around you in the physical plane, but to long and feel called towards what is up there or under there. Feels, I do feel that connection to you too, definitely. We always talk about these things when we speak.
Exactly.
Spirituality and the deep connection to the invisible world. No, 100%. And excavation is hard. But I also think that, I mean, probably a lot of people don't want to do that, but also I feel like a lot of people are just not made for that. That's probably not their project in this lifetime.
But but you know, I think that hopefully, you know, we're trying to decolonize as a society, as a mass society. We're trying to understand structures and systems that are not working for us, and we are trying to collapse them internally. Capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy. But this book is also such a reflection of that. You know, what does that look like when you're doing that work internally? Because that work is deep work, and a lot of the time it means that you're questioning your human interpersonal relationships, because so much of your politics should be seen in the way that you relate to human beings. And I think that that's maybe another reason why a lot of folks don't want to do that, you know, because they don't want to go there. It's painful to look at those things, you know, because then you have to question a lot of things that led you there. And
no, you're right. It is a project that we should be tackling collectively, and I think that we also are forced to do that right now with what is happening across the world.
Exactly. And I think, you know, the writers, and in the best sense, are trying to work towards that revolution. And I think, you know, all of my work is really saying, like, you can't have that revolution without that revolution in yourself, without that shift, without like learning about the systems, the abusive systems that you've applied to yourself, you know. If you're not unlearning those things and just putting them back into your community while pretending as if you're not, then that's just, we're back to square one, you know. And so, like, what does it look like to really start that work and see how glacial it really is for everybody?
So everybody should buy Like a Bird right now. Because we need it as a guidance in order to do that work internally and in our communities, and to just learn a lot about ourselves. I cried so much, especially during the end of the book. And I could talk with you about this forever. I just want to remind the audience that you're welcome to ask questions either in the chat or the Q&A function now, as we are nearing towards the end of this, but I also have like a million questions I can ask you in the meantime. One thing I want to talk about is you're dedicating this book to survivors, and you're saying that this is a survival story first and foremost, which it is, which also is very special, I think, and unique to this novel is that we often experience, I mean, sexual assault is a topic that, or a theme that happens to a lot of women in fiction, to a lot of female characters, but we never see how they recover from that, really, right? They become these wounded creatures and are kind of either saved by a male figure or not really talked about anymore at all, and just have dysfunctional relationships over and over again. But you're creating the opposite, or not the opposite, but like kind of a sequel to that, right? Like we see her stumbling through all of the through the pain of the wound and through those dysfunctional and self-destructive behaviors that she's going through, but we also see her heal, and she has a real redemption arc, which I find so, I don't know, beautiful and moving. And I wonder what the importance of like the cycle of death and life was for you in creating this story, because it feels like death is so integral to it, but then we get to birth.
Yeah, I mean, we live and die and rebirth so many times in our lives, and I think being human really is learning how to die and learning how to be okay with your death. That to me is a really worthy life if you've done that, if you've been able to do that. And you know, rape as a motif, and also as a real motif in your life is an instrument of change. You know, like there's been so many times throughout my life that I've been jolted into different phases just simply because of like my own relationship to my abuse. So wait, Aria, I think you're frozen. No. Aria. Hello? Hey, Mara. I don't know what happened.
Hey,
Sorry.
hi. Sorry, not sure. It looks like we lost Aria just then. Curses Zoom and the internet. We're gonna try and figure that out.
Okay.
Yeah. So how are you doing?
Good.
Good, great. Glad to hear it. It's been a wonderful conversation so far.
I know. I hope we get to finish it.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Oh, here we go.
Is she back?
Okay. Looks like she's back. I'll hop off then. See you later.
Thank you. Hi. Are you back?
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Don't worry.
I'm back, but you're frozen. I don't know if that's
no.
a good sign or not.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, were you asked? Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Nice. So what were you guys talking about while I was gone?
Nothing. I was just like, Aria, where did you go? That was all that happened.
Okay.
But you asked me something, and I think I started talking.
Oh yeah. I asked you about the birth and death and that cycle and how that plays into Taylia's healing story.
Right. So yeah, I think I think I answered it. Like, we're all in a process of life and death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, cool. I love that it ends with an optimistic but yet realistic scene. I can't say, I can't tell you often enough how much I cried. And like, I'm rereading it right now and I'm already dreading getting to that point because it just felt so visceral. But yeah. Okay, so before I go to the audience questions, I want to ask you how you are healing yourself. Like, what types of self-care things do you practice in order to I don't know, practice mental hygiene and take care of your own psyche in a time like this, but also as someone who writes about traumatic experiences, because it's hard, right? Like, it is that process of self-excavation, which kind of can be really, really painful and also dangerous.
I try and pray every day. I try and meditate and pray every day, and I pull cards as well. And I feel like that really frames my day. I do it in the morning. I do everything in the morning. And that I've been doing that almost, every day for about a year. And it's shifted my relationship to self and the divine, and also just planetary forces. You accept. I think I've become much better at accepting each day and the way that it turns out, much more than I used to before I started doing this. So those 3 things have been the most beneficial self-care activities that I do. And then I don't know, I try and check in. That's still a very hard thing for me to do. Check in genuinely with how I'm feeling. I started, if I have a feeling, especially a bad feelings I don't know what to do with, because I make them really hazy, and then I get very uncomfortable with the fact that they're there, and then I dismiss them. So these days I've been trying to sit with that whatever I feel in a certain moment. If I'm feeling a fire run through me, what could that mean? And locating it and then putting it into words has really helped, and my therapist has really helped with that. I'm gaining a better understanding to who I am, and that is a lifelong mission. Self-care is a lifelong mission. It's not something that you can just do for a little while. It's really like a radical notion of self that you have to commit to.
Right. No, that's so true. It is a lifelong mission, like therapy and healing, self-care. You have to continue to do that. Okay, so I'm going to get to the questions now. Didem asks, what is it like to navigate the world of publishing along with the endeavor of getting your work out there as a minority in a predominantly white world? And it says in brackets that it's coming from another queer Muslim woman, and that it's hard out here. Yeah, that's true.
It is really hard out here. Yeah, I totally relate. But I mean, both of us have found homes for our work. We have audiences. I think really the hardest part of writing is that you have to write. It just really requires that consistency. I didn't make any money until my 8th year of writing, really. Ever. I was living a really difficult life up until 2 years ago, and this year was hard again. So it's it's an ongoing journey. But I think that if you can write with truth and write consistently, it does pay off. And you just have to keep pitching, keep, you know, writing a book if you know, and really like, yeah, commit to the work.
Yeah. And I want to add to that you need to stay faithful to your vision also, because there is a way to do like a bend towards the white gaze and write what they want to hear. And sometimes that aligns with what you want to write. That's okay too. You don't have to like rebel against your own story just because of somebody's expectations. I think that's important too. You just need to be honest with yourself and your work. And it is hard out there, but it's, yeah, find community, like-minded writers, and keep writing. As Fariha said, that's the most important thing. Okay, the next question from Anonymous. Writing Like a Bird must have been both traumatizing and transformative. Do these two happen in a parallel as at the same time, or do they come more in waves? Were there moments when you thought the pain wasn't worth it, or when you doubted that you would be able to complete the work? Great question.
Yeah, so it was transformative, and what was the other word?
Transformative and traumatizing.
Traumatizing, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they do go hand in hand, unfortunately. You know, like any kind of spiritual work is deeply, deeply rough work. I don't like doing it, but I feel great after. You know, I feel great in the months of clarity and all that. And writing is very similar. It's so grueling, especially the writing that comes in Like a Bird. It's so grueling to think about an emotion, or to think about all of the things that Taylia is always living and existing in, which is self-doubt and self-critique and the never-ending hole of feeling like you're not good enough, which is absolutely my own experience. And so everything can play into that feeling. And when you're writing about it, it really means that these things, there's like these tiny eruptions that happen where you're, you know, remembering a moment, because you're trying to access truth. So you're almost like poking holes in yourself to like bring out true emotion. And you know, when you get it right and when you really hit a nerve, it's very, very hard. But then when you're able to put it onto a page, it lessens the load. It really is deep cathartic work. And the end result is truly remarkable. You know, however complicated feelings I can have about this book, because I think when you write a book, you're always like seeing its own holes. You want that to a certain degree because you want to be a better writer, but it's worth it. It's worth writing it.
Beautiful. Okay, Fabian asks, hi, I just thought I'd pop a question in here. Maybe you've touched on this a bit, but they're asking about geography, place, and memory, both in the book and in life, because earlier today you were reflecting on your relationship to Montreal and how you've inhabited places all around the world. How has this text been shaped by your varied experiences of placidness, and has its publication impacted your sense of place now?
Yeah, I mean, I started writing it in Australia, so it was not set in New York for a long time. It was only until I came to New York and I started doing the drafts again that it made more sense to have her live in New York. And you know, I'm writing another novel, and I'm thinking a lot about place and symmetry, and as diaspora, like we're constantly, you know, thinking about memory and dislocation, and diasporic kids, and of course all of it affects you. I know like people make fun of like, you know, diasporic poetry and all this shit, but like that writing is important because you're talking about the bridge. You're talking about that mercurial part of when you are many different things, and many of us are many different things at once. So location absolutely played into it. And then just like, yeah, the location and like the viscerality of her experience of living and existing in New York is very much like something that I wanted to embody in the pages, because her communication with herself is so important. However, she's also like trying to dull a lot of what's going on, so it has to be outside of her, you know. So like the ways in which she's engaging with her environment is very important, and that's something I really liked playing with, being able to, you know, access certain memories of like walking down the Williamsburg Bridge and what it feels like, you know, what the air feels like, what the scent of fuel smells like on the bridge. You know, there's all of these things that I really wanted to show. So yeah, memory and location was very important in writing this book.
Yeah, I love what you said about diasporic kids always being concerned with place. It's true. It's something I think about all the time. No matter where I am, I have like this romantic relationship to cities and places, and even apartments and houses, because nothing feels like it's my ancestral place, right? So I'm trying to make it and carve something out of it and make everything meaningful. Okay, so Anusha is asking, how has your family navigated your excavation process when truths are revealed that they may not be ready to face, or that are beyond the scope of what they're willing to accept?
Yeah, I have a very conflicted relationship with my family. I think, you know, my sister and my father are very supportive of me, because we all lived together and survived something, which is our varying relationships to my mother. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't talk to my mom anymore. That is very much because of who I am, and of the things that I need from her that she won't give me. And all of that is about memory, and all of it is about abuse. So yeah, it's not an easy road. It hasn't been an easy road. I think all of my relatives are like, okay, you're a writer, cool. Like they don't really engage with it that deeply. I don't have a lot of family that does. It's really just my dad and my sister. And I think both of them definitely have their own relationships to it. You know, years ago, my dad said for me to never write about my mom in a way that would make her look bad. And I think he's also stopped talking to her. So it's interesting. I think that's probably changed. I haven't asked him. But to me, I think he knows me well enough now at 30 that he knows like he can't really control me, and that I'm going to write what I need to write, because he sees value in it, which is wild. I never thought he would, but he does. He sees value in it, because even my existence in his life has helped him recognize so much of his trauma and PTSD. So yeah, it's like I think that's why we do it, because, you know, you have to live your truth sometimes so your parents can. It's not an easy road, but it's just something that if you can commit to it, you hope that your family will mirror that process as well.
Beautifully stated. This reminds me of something that Sharon Olds said, because she's, I mean, obviously a completely different writer, but she writes really openly about her own autobiographical experiences and trauma that she's experienced in her family. And like, there are characters that are definitely lifted from her life. And she didn't publish Stag's Leap, the book that won the Pulitzer Prize, until her children were old enough that they could understand what it's about. And she told them not to read it. And her family, like her immediate family, does not read her work because they know that it might hurt them. And she has created that boundary for herself to maintain a relationship with her kids and her her other family. But yeah, it's a really difficult process if you're openly writing about wounds that are affecting other people too, because I think there is an ethical aspect to it. Yeah, and you might be hurting people, but sometimes that's also just the job of the writer, as unromantic and egoistic as it sounds.
I mean, yeah, because especially if you're doing it for yourself, which is first and foremost, you know, like what any writer should be doing it for, not for an audience, for yourself.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, exactly. There is an ethical transgression that sometimes happens, but you just hope that if you're doing it with integrity, then, you know, you're doing it with integrity.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we have any questions left.
There was somebody that I saw ask, like, what Bangladeshi writers? I want to just answer that.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Okay.
So I, you know, recently, or, you know, last year, found Ruqayya Sakhawat Hossain, who is a writer, a Bangladeshi writer who wrote Sultana's Dream in 1907, which is a feminist utopia. And she learned to read from her sister, and she was a woman that was questioning convention even at that time. And it's a remarkable book, you know, like you know, a utopia, a feminist utopia. It's like, you know, early sci-fi. It's so fucking cool. She's written a lot of essays. She's just a really smart person. And it's cool how there's like this cyclicalness of, I talk about this with Tanis a lot, and Tanis is also one of my favorite Bangladeshi writers. You know, somebody who encompasses, she talks about Bangladesh being syncretic all the time. And I think that that's the kind of writing that we're drawn to, syncretic writing, things that are cross-genre and merge into one another, you know? You're talking about Muslimness, you're talking about queerness, you're talking about, you know, this abstraction of South Asianness. All of those things are really valid and beautiful and powerful things. But yeah, so Tanais, Tarfia Faizullah, Ruqayya Sakhawat Hossain. You know, I do love Tagore. I was raised on Tagore. Yeah, those are probably my favorites. But I am trying to read a lot more Bangladeshi writers, and Ziya Hadar Rahman wrote a really incredible book a couple of years ago. You know, there's Monica Ali. There's a lot of people that are, I mean, Jhumpa Lahiri, Obs. You know, there's some OGs. I mean, Jhumpa actually is like one of my favorites of all time. The Namesake is one of my favorite books of all time. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing Bangladeshi Bengali writing out there that people should read.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you for that. Thank you for all the questions, guys. Makes me feel great.
Hello again.
Hi.
Hi. So thanks so much once more for the lovely conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Gentle reminder that, of course, the books are available on our website online. Check out mtl.drawnandquarterly.com. Beautiful. Also, if you've missed any part of this stream, the VOD will be available to watch on YouTube later, so be sure to catch that.
Thank you so much, Drawn and Quarterly. I love you so much. Every single time I'm in Montreal, I come to D+Q. It's literally one of my favorite bookstores of all time. I feel so seen and loved by this store, so please support them and buy from them. Support indie books. Support indie bookstores. Yeah.
The feeling is absolutely mutual.
Yay!
Yay! So much love. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aria. Yay! Thank you. Thanks so much, guys. This is beautiful.
Thank you guys for inviting me. This was amazing.
Talk to you soon.
Have a good night.
Bye.